Hey everyone, welcome back to Somonul Art. I'm Somonul, and today we're diving into the final part of our airplane rigging project in Maya. In this video, we'll cover set-driven keys to animate the landing gear, program these into a control curve, and finish by attaching all the main controls to the primary master controller. So let's get started. If you're just joining this series, thanks so much for checking out the channel. We've covered a lot of ground, as you can see. I've got all the control curves already set in. The only thing I have left to do, and we're going to add some set-driven keys for these, is going to be the hatch that closes for the rear landing gear. This is going to be cool. So first things first, I've got to make some controls for these. So I'm going to disable the geometry. I don't want to look at that. It's really distracting. And I might actually disable my core controls just so I can see the joints really easy. And we'll go up here to create NURBS primitives and our friendly circle. Now if you're smart, unlike me, you could probably just hotkey this to your shelf so you can just push it, since I've used it so many times, but I do not have that there for some strange odd reason. You never know. But we got our control curve created right here. And as we learned in the last video, labeling is such an important thing. I know this right here is my wheel hatch. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push V on my keyboard, and I'm going to hold V. I'm just going to click right here and drag it to my joint. Perfect. Now, I'm going to rotate this because I don't want it in that direction. Make it 90 degrees. Let's see if I can go into my front view. Let's see if we can make this look a little bit unique so we know what in the world it is. We'll just bring this down like that. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good, I think. So we will snap back to our main camera here. And do we need to scale this down any? Let's go ahead and load our geometry back on. Yeah, we definitely want to scale this down. This is pretty wild. It's not a main control, so we don't have to worry about it dominating the scene, so we can hunt it down. It's only going to be used when this gear retracts. So we won't need to see too much of it. I think that's a good size. So, as usual, it's super important to zero these all out. I'm going to go here to my freeze transformations icon right here. But if you're new to this channel, we'll just show you how to do that. You can go up to modify, and then right here, freeze transformations. And just like that, all these are zeroed out. Now for some freak reason, if it has to get moved around somewhere, and I want to go back to my default, we are golden right there, guys. Oh, that's just beautiful. Alright, so let's go ahead and disable this from our view again. I want to duplicate this, and we're going to change negative axis so I have a mirror version of it, and this time we're going to just V key again, snap it over to this joint right here. Beautiful, and then we will freeze those transformations as well. I've got some history on here. Shift Control D. We'll remove that. We don't want any history on our curves. That's just useless information we don't need for the scene. And I've got my control curves already created. All I've got to do now is rename them. And I'll be consistent with my naming convention here for this project. Core, right, rear hatch. I'll just highlight that, copy, hit Control C, hit enter, and then I'll paste that right into here, and I will change the R to an L for left side. There we go. So now I've got both my controls all set up. Just that simple. So the next thing we want to do is we want to constrain these to our joints. To do that, we're just going to select our curve first. We'll select the joint we want to constrain it to. We'll go up here to constrain, and we're going to do a parent constraint on this. I'm going to click the options box right here, and just to double check, make sure you have maintain offset checked, and then we'll click add. Nothing crazy happened. That's a good thing. So now when I select this curve, I can move that joint all around. And let's do the same with the other side here. We'll select our curve first, select our joint, we'll go up here to constrain, parent constrain. So now we should have both of these controls operating identical. Beautiful. Alright. This is looking pretty good. We're ready now to move on. So let's start adding those set driven keys. We'll turn our controls back on because I'm going to need my skeleton control right here, which right now is my primary control. By the end of this video, we'll link everything together to this main control, but for now, a lot of my stuff is actually plugged into here and a few other controls. We got the spin on the turbines over here and some other things going on, but we'll get those all grouped together soon. But right now I need this control because you can see I've got my rear wheel retract, so we're going to be operating from that. Now in our same menu here, the animation, we're going to go up here to key, we'll click that. We're going to scroll down just a little bit till we see the set driven key. We're going to click this box where it says set. It should pop up this new window box right here. So this is a pretty easy to use tool once you get familiar with it. We're going to select where I have my control hidden right now, rear wheel retract. That's going to be my driver. So I'm going to select load driver. And you'll see it popped up a couple options. I'm going to scroll down until I find the rear wheel and select that. Uh-oh. We want to make sure we get the right one. Rear wheel retract. And then those new control curves that I made, I'm going to select each one of those, and I'm going to have those be the driving. So we're going to load driven, have both of those. Now I want to select all my X, Y axes for translate and rotate, and we're going to click key. And the reason I'm doing that is because some of the offsets on some of my hinges are not going to be able to be rotated the way I want them to. So we're going to have to cheat a little bit by using the translate axes to get that going. But we'll be able to do that just fine. So I can click my control that's being the driver right here, or I can just click right here, which is really handy because a lot of times things get lost in the shuffle visually. And we're going to go to our rear wheel retract, and I'm going to set this value to about 3. I think that'll look good. And we'll turn our mesh right back on. There we go. Now I can see what's going on a little bit. Going to select my curve right here, go into the rotate tool, and I'm going to start. It's going to be a subtle start. So I'm going to go -14. That's going to make it easy for the other side. I'm going to click here, and then this one's going to be 14 right there, and then we'll keyframe that. So we've set our second key on that. I'm going to click my controller again and see how does that look. It's very subtle. So we'll go to number 9 for this because we're going to have a lock-in motion at the end. That'll make it a little bit interesting. So now we can go ahead and rotate this all the way out. As you can see, it doesn't fully rotate on the inside, and that's just the nature of this hinge right here. We'll have it translate in. That's why I saved that last one. It'll make sense in just a moment. So we'll dial this down to 163. No, I think we need to go a little bit further in. -165. How's that look? Yeah, I like that. That looks good. So we'll just change this guy now to 165. We'll hit the keyframe on that again. And now we're going to select our controller curve again. And you can see we've got a nice, actually if I wouldn't be blocking the view there, you can see we've got a nice, pretty good animation going right now. We just need to get this nice and flush. So we're going to change the value to 10, which it already is. I've got it at the maximum. So the last one we used right here was 9. And now we're going to use the full maximum value for that. We will select our curve. And this time, we're definitely going to want to translate it just a little bit up. There we go, 1.6. We'll copy that so I can paste it onto the other side. Make sure we're in the correct axis here. That's kind of strange. Looks like it's not. Maybe it's just the shadowing. No, it's definitely. That's weird. I wonder what's going on with that. Just push that in a little bit more until it looks good. Alright, and we'll set our key, but make sure we have both of our curves selected. We'll just hit key right here. And then we'll go to our control curve right here. And we'll select our rear wheel retract. So you see it drops down first. Then it's going to open up. And there we go. Beautiful. One thing we can do to kind of polish this up just a little bit is go into our Windows, Animation Editors, and we'll load our Graph Editor. For this, I want it to be nice and linear, so I'm going to leave these keyframes alone, but I want these to be a little bit smoother. So we'll change those to spline. You see we got a little bit more of a nice curved out slope. We'll do the exact same with the other side. Let's minimize this, select our main control curve, and see how that looks. So it still drops. We have a little bit more fluidic flow to that. I like that. Alright, and that's about all there is to set-driven keys. Pretty simple, huh? Let's move right on. So for our master control here, you can see we just got a curve, and it's labeled control. I've got most of my controls linked to this skeleton core, and I'm going to want to add these onto our main one. The only difference is I want to combine the front wheel retract, the rear wheel retract into one single control. We'll continue to keep the wheel front rotation, and oh, that reminds me, I still need to make wheel rotations for the rear wheels. That's what that little R right left is for. And then I've got the front steering, that's going to be a separate control. And of course the cool control, the conversion, where everything converts into its core block. We're going to have that all driven right from this control. So that way I'm not going to have to fish around for these little ones. I can actually disable them and just operate this whole rig just based off of this one control, which is going to be really handy. To do this, we're going to select our control curve. We're going to go to Modify up here, and we're going to scroll down to Add Attribute, and we'll click that. It's going to pop this menu up. So we're going to have a lot of these to do. I'm going to name my first control conversion, and I'm going to give it a minimum value of 0, a maximum value of 10, and I'm going to make sure it's a float data type. There's a lot of other options, but the ones we're going to be using for this is just going to be the simple float. And then we'll click Add, and you can see right over here we have conversion added to the attribute editor. This is going to be pretty powerful. The next thing we're going to do, wheels, let's see, wheel retract, give it a simple name. And again, we're going to do minimum value of 10, or 0, and then a maximum value of 10. We'll click Add for that. Now you can give this a value as high as you want. Sometimes you may need more than 10, depends on how smooth you want your animation to flow. But for most situations, a value of 10 is just perfect. You could use just 1 if you want, and have this as a 0, and you can get 0.1, different values that are on a smaller scale. So, but I just find that 10 just works really happy for me, so I usually stick with that one. So I've got my values again. Let's see here. And now we got a different control that we've got to set up. So for this control, we're going to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to keep my float value, and my maximum value is going to be 10, and then I'm going to change this to a -10, because this wheel goes in both directions, so we're going to need to be able to do that. And then our last control, we'll just name it turbines, and we'll change that from 0 and then to 10, the usual default for me. We'll click add, and I think that's all the controls we need for now, so we can close this out. Well, we're in the home stretch for these controls, guys. This is awesome. So to do this, we're going to go back to our set driven keys. Here to key, set driven key, and we'll click set. This time, we're going to select our main controller curve. We're going to load that as our driver, and you see all the new things that we created are populated right here. So that's going to be really handy. And we will select our skeleton core control, and that's going to be our driven. So we'll load that into the load driven. So we'll just match conversion with conversion and click the key right here. Beautiful. Now we'll select our main control here. We'll change this value to 10. And in case you're struggling to find it in here, although it's pretty easy, we can just click that right there. But again, you can click the control directly from the set driven key menu, which is super handy. We'll change that to a 10. It's all folded up. And we'll click key. And to make sure everything's functioning correctly, look at that. Beautiful. So now I've got all my controls, or at least that control set up. I've got a couple more to go, so I'm going to zero this back out. Now I've got my wheel retract controls I need to do. So I'll click that right here. And then for this one's important because I'm actually piloting 2 controls at once. So now I'm not going to have to separate those. It's going to be all driven by one single control, which is going to be super handy. I'll go ahead and click key, make sure everything is on 0, especially the wheel retract. And now we'll select our main primary controller. We'll set the wheel retract to 10. This is important. You don't want to do this the reverse way, because when you set this to 10, it's going to auto default to the first key that we have. So now we're going to select our skeleton core. We've already got that selected. We're going to maximize these out to 10. And then we will hit the key. And we'll test that out now. Make sure that's functioning correctly as we get these values back, and all the gears are working correctly now. That's awesome. So we've got that down to 0. Alright, now to set up the turbines. This is going to be cool. This is on a separate controller right here. So I'm going to select the turbine control. I'm going to load that into load driven. And you see I got speed settings for each one of these turbines. There's 6 turbines. So I'm going to make sure I select all those. And I'm going to select turbines right there. And I'm going to hit a key on that. Let's go back to our main control. And I'm going to set that to a value of 10. And for this, I'm going to set these all to 10. And I'm going to set that to a keyframe. So as I scrub through this with it set at 0, you can see nothing's happening. As to be expected, but now something better happened when I set that to 10. And sure enough, as we scrub through the slider here, our turbines are moving. That's pretty cool. Oh man, I'm liking that. So we'll go back, set this to 0. And there we go. We've got our control curve all set up. All right, with our primary controller set up, we're ready to parent all these things together. But not quite, because I'm not happy with one thing. As I mentioned in the last video when we made this control curve, we pivoted to the center of the aircraft. So as I rotate, I can bank all around. It's also pivoted to our root joint, which is important. But what happens when we want to make sure this is completely flat to the ground? Well, we've got a bit of a problem there, don't we? Because our axis is way up here, and our ground is right here where our main controller line is. So how can we address this? Well, I'm glad you asked that. I'm actually going to make yet another controller for this. We'll go up to Create, Nerd Primitives, and we'll go to our handy sphere one last time. And we'll just kind of stretch this out. And we're going to give this just a little extra control here. So now, when I need to, everything's going to be at the base. That'll be nice and locked down. Let's name this a correct name here, or base. Oh, this is. Yeah, it's going to sound weird, but we'll just go with it. We're going to delete our history here, freeze transformations, and I'm actually going to make this look a little bit more unique because this is kind of a critical component that we have here. I'll just make it look like that. I don't want it to go outside of the bounding box that I have here already pre-established. So we'll just shrink this down just a little bit. I'm definitely going to give this curve a new color. Let's go enable overrides. Don't want to, red, that'll work. So that way it's definitely distinguished which is which. And this will just help make sure we get it locked down to the surface, just in case we need it. The whole reason I'm not putting this as my main control though, is because most of the time I'm not going to be using this. This is going to be kind of a secondary controller. Probably not the best way to do this, but for how I'm going to be animating it, I think this is going to be the best option I have right now. And to do this, I'm just going to select my takeoff curve here, and I'm going to parent that to my new curve. So now when I select it, everything should move around. But I did not clean up my project correctly. So as you can see, those hatches are stuck behind there because the controls are not parented to anything. So I've got both of these selected now. We'll select our main skeleton and we'll parent that to that. And now everything follows just as to be expected. Beautiful. Oh man, this is going to be one happy core fighter. I'm loving this. And a little bit more house cleaning. We will add this into our controls group. So I'm going to control click that and then parent that right into there. So now all my controls are going to be living in here. My primary controller is going to be a separate controller though, so I'm just going to group that right into here to the root. Just like that. It's always good to pay attention, make sure nothing changed. Sometimes that happens where you've got an offset, then you've got to try and figure out where something went wrong, but luckily that's not the case. Usually isn't, but sometimes that does happen. Now you're probably wondering why I did not parent this into the main controls or parent it to the group before that. And that's because we're going to actually parent constrain this. This is going to be its own separate entity right here. So the best way to do this, of course, is to save before we do anything in Maya. So one easy way we can do this is just to select this and to select our base control and add a parent constraint. But if I do that, now I can't keyframe these. So this controller that locks me down at the base is kind of useless now. So I'm going to undo that. And remember how I've been adding those SDK groups to most of my controls? We're going to add one of those to this one. And let me just check and make sure. So now when I select this group number 1, which we need to rename, I just basically copied this earlier, so it should still be in the memory, which it is. I'm going to change this control to SDK. We're not using any set driven keys on it though, but it's going to be our parent constraint group right here. I'm going to select my core fighter control, master control right here, and then select our new group that we created, and then go up here to constrain, parent constrain, and everything looks like it should have been okay. I don't see any wild numbers added to any of these. And as we push the up key for our SDK group, you can see these have got the keyframes that are being constrained, but we can also use this now to keyframe that if we need to. So that's kind of handy. And then our master control, right where we want the axis to be, and that all functions normally. Let's turn our geometry on so we can actually see it. Beautiful. And if I needed to add a secondary animation to it, I can animate that. And if you're wondering why I have the takeoff control curve here, well, if this thing's running down the runway, I added this so the axis point is actually right here on the wheels. So if I need to now, I can rotate it right on the wheels. I can grab my main controller and keyframe it, and we can give it that takeoff motion. And as it begins to take off, then we can readjust this value back down. So that comes in pretty handy. It's another secondary animation that we can use just to add a little bit more realism to it. And that about wraps it up for our airplane core fighter rigging series. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions or you want to see more content like this, leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Somonul Art for more tutorials and creative projects. Thanks so much for watching, my friends, and I hope to see you in the next video. Happy animating, my friends.